your family. It's August 31st. We moved outside, as you can see. I'm Ainsley Earhart. Big election news overnight with important seats up for grabs. How did John McCain, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, how did they fare? We have the results.
Oh, yes, we do. And then Donald Trump heads south of the border, the American border, for a surprise meeting today with the president of Mexico. This just hours before his big speech on immigration. Tonight, we are live as this news unfolds.
Yeah, this is the best election season ever. Hey, remember when Hillary Clinton said this?
We turned over everything that was work-related. I turned over every work-related email in my possession.
Well, turns out that is not true. We have brand new evidence of that. And keep in mind, our slogan remains, mornings, even in humidity, is better with friends. Woo! So far, it's still hard to get tickets.
Tucker kind of touched on this at the top of the hour, but in just a few hours from now, Donald Trump is going to be heading down to Mexico.
Yep, get this. The GOP nominee announcing overnight that he's going to meet today with the president of Mexico just hours before his landmark, detailed immigration speech in Arizona.
What exactly is going on here? Who better to ask than our senior national correspondent, John Roberts, who is live this morning in Phoenix. Good to see you, John.
Almost as surprising as Katy Perry on the fiddle, let me tell you that. Good morning to you, Tucker, Ainsley, Brian. This really came as a surprise when Donald Trump announced last night, and this is something that was decided by the campaign over the weekend, that he was going to accept Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto's invitation to come down for a meeting in Mexico City. Peña Nieto extended invitations to both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Trump got the jump on Hillary Clinton. And wouldn't you just, I mean, this is the sort of thing that a journalist would just die to be in that meeting. Can you imagine? Because here's a Mexican president who is likened Donald Trump to Hitler and Mussolini. Here's a Donald Trump who has said that Mexico is taking advantage of the United States. He's going to build a big wall. And in a call and response now that his audiences across the country have gotten used to, every time he shouts out, who's going to pay for the wall? The crowd shouts back, Mexico. All of this really is a perfect dovetail curtain raiser into the big speech that he's going to give at the convention center behind me here in Phoenix later on today, about 9 o'clock Eastern time, in which he will lay out a detailed plan for combating illegal immigration. And one of the big things he's going to talk about is what to do with the millions upon millions of people who have entered this country illegally over the decades and remain here. Last night, with Brett Baier filling in for Bill O'Reilly, Kellyanne Conway, his campaign manager, gave us a preview of what Donald Trump will say tonight. Here she is.
No amnesty, no legalization, no sanctuary cities. When dealing with the 11 million or so, he wants to abide the law, enforce the law, which is a novel concept in Washington. People who have committed a crime are gone. And then he wants to see what we're left with. He will address that tomorrow, and I think you will see one of the toughest speeches on illegal immigration in modern political history.
You know, Kellyanne Conway making the point to Brett last night that these speeches, these policy speeches that Donald Trump is giving, all kind of fit in with his ongoing debate preparation. She says, while Hillary Clinton is giving one speech a week in which she's talking about Donald Trump, Trump is out there talking about the issues. Now, you could also make the case, Brian, Ainsley, and Tucker, that she is much more well-versed on all of the issues, not just domestic, but international as well, and that Trump needs to be out there giving these speeches to lay down markers that he can draw on in the debates. But it certainly will be interesting on September the 26th at Hofstra University there in New York, when the two of them finally come together on the stage. Which one is better prepared to handle the issues, and how will they, attack each other and deal with each other in terms of those debate zingers that audiences for decades have wanted to see. And those are the things really that can turn the debates more than policy ever could. Back to you.
Right. Yeah. It's so funny. I mean, there's such different styles, such different experiences, and such different preparation. We could expect the unexpected. John Roberts, great job.
Yeah, he's going to have to be prepared for her going after him and attacking him.
On detail.
And he's going to have to control himself and not fight back. That's right. At least what a lot of people want.
When Tucker looks up to the side and the right, he's imagining something. So what are you about to say?
I was just thinking. I think debates are tough. I think they're tough. I think she's very experienced at that. I think this move, going to meet with the president of Mexico, is surprisingly nimble and smart and agile. This is what he didn't do after he won the primaries. He didn't go meet with a lot of his critics.
Let's go to Israel.
Shows power.
This is a guy, the president of most open. And Trump meeting with him, I think, is a sign that Trump, of him being magnanimous, that he's powerful. This is what you do when you win. You meet with the people you vanquished.
No,
I think it's very smart of Trump to do this.
Well, the invitation was extended to Hillary Clinton and to Donald Trump. He's the one who's going down there to meet with him. They're going to meet at the president's residence. And Rudy Giuliani's going, and so is Senator Sessions, Jeff Sessions.
It was interesting to see. I guess Governor Pence is going to introduce him tonight in Arizona.
At 6 o'clock.
You know what I found fascinating over the last 2.5 weeks, and there's been a lot, is that when you look at all the demographics and the people that Donald Trump has to max out, not many people said max out the African-American vote and minorities. Right. They said, well, you kind of lost them because of some things you said. Do you know what's happened over the last 2.5, 3 weeks? He is focusing, doggedly on the African-American vote, talking about them in their communities. He's going to do it Saturday as well as the Hispanic vote.
Maybe that's one of the reasons that we're seeing the polls narrowing. I also think it's the immigration stance, because the far right is going to vote for him no matter what. Many of that group, they want to see illegal immigrants being deported. But I think the people that are in the middle, they like the fact that there's going to be a wall. However, they don't want families separated. Well, they want children that are born here to stay with their moms.
Mass low-wage immigration hurts everyone at the bottom of the income scale, and it hurts an awful lot of black voters. And if you talk to them, I think Trump's not going to win a lot of black voters. I think But
you said the numbers have come up past Romney.
Let me put it this way. But Romney won 6% of the African-American vote. The NBC poll has Trump to 8%. That's low. It's better than Romney did. So there's some perspective for you. But the immigration issue, I really think, is a real winner for him among black voters, potentially, if he can sell it. Why is it good for black voters if you're importing massive numbers of people at the low end of the wage scale? It's not. It's terrible.
Right.
And they know that.
Kellyanne Conway told us on the radio yesterday that it's more important for the voters to see the wall built up and the enforcement done than it is for those here illegally who have not broken any laws to be deported. So that's what he's going to talk about tonight.
But it's the legal immigration. Democrats have been selling this lie to working class Americans like, we're all in it together. No. Actually, unemployment rates are really high in certain communities, partly because we're importing tons of cheap labor. Like, it's supply and demand. It's really simple.
Are y'all shocked that there's another email controversy this morning?
Hasn't stopped. It has not stopped.
I'm enjoying it.
There were 30 emails that were recovered from the FBI, we're being told, that involve or are related to Benghazi, and these are Hillary Clinton's State Department emails.
If you're Trey Gowdy and you sat there in that select committee trying to investigate for over a year what the bottom line is and what the truth is behind that, and they came up with their conclusions and they interviewed Hillary Clinton, and you think you have all there is, or you think that at least that's all you can get, and then this emerges, what are you thinking today?
Well, you'd be pretty surprised, because you would think to yourself, wait, didn't she promise us in explicit terms that she turned over every single email?
Didn't she turn over
and you think,
every
well, maybe
single
I'm making that up in my mind, but then you would go to the tape, or you would turn on Fox and Friends, and you would see this.
We turned over everything that was work-related, every single thing. Personal stuff, we did not. And all I can tell you is that I turned over every work-related email in my possession. What we turned over were more than 30,000 emails that I assumed were already in the government system, Brett, because they were sent to state.gov addresses.
Sure, but there were some that were just recently discovered and turned over.
No, that was in the State Department, not in me.
Okay.
I've turned over everything. Oh, what's a few more?
15,000 more. 15,000. What's a few more? 30 of which related to Benghazi, which has been a constant source of conversation and inquiry for the families that lost their loved ones, for those who fought over there, and to get to the bottom of what actually happened over there when our ambassador gets assassinated.
Right. I don't think those emails are boring to those family members.
And by the way, they don't belong to Hillary Clinton. These are government emails. They belong to us, the taxpayer. They do. And they're being held, these 30, by the State Department, which is saying it's going to take a month to declassify them and to get them ready for public consumption. And a judge has said, what's that going to take a month to go through 30 emails? What are you doing?
And they were going to, they're saying they're going to release her schedule after the election. Well, thank goodness now a federal judge is making these emails be released before the election. So eventually
we have a right to know. They're ours.
And Judicial Watch is submitting questions that she has to answer in writing, but I'm sure as a lawyer with a team of lawyers, she's going to find a way to get around them. Citizens United Judicial Watch has done an unbelievable job.
Donald Trump is set to deliver a major immigration speech in Arizona tonight, saying he is ready to respond to critics who accuse him of softening his stance. His campaign manager says that is not the case.
You'll hear a consistent Donald Trump in this way. No amnesty, no legalization, no sanctuary cities. So these parents, these angel moms and dad that we have seen up on the stage with him, and let me give you some names, Laura and Michelle and Jamil and Agnes and Julie. These are real people whose children were killed by illegal immigrants who should not have been here. Kate Steinle, no more sanctuary cities.
Guest was mentioned in that clip, and she says that she's going to be listening very carefully to the speech tonight.
Julie Goldwach's 25-year-old son Spencer was murdered by a career criminal and an illegal alien who'd been deported 4 times, was a known gang member, had served time in federal prison, but still managed somehow to stay in this country. Julie Goldwach joins us now. Julie, thanks a lot for joining us this morning. So a lot of us have been kind of confused about what Mr. Trump's position is on some of these issues. He's going to lay it down in stone for the country tonight. What do you want to hear him say?
I want to hear him continue to stay on message, that he's going to secure the border, that he's going to enforce the laws, which includes E-Verify, not allowing sanctuary cities, and having law enforcement turn over illegal aliens to ICE.
Are you disappointed with the current administration, and do you think if Hillary Clinton gets in office, it's more of the same? And do you blame your son's death on the administration?
Oh, absolutely. The policies that have continued in this country for years, Hillary Clinton has on her website that she's going to allow amnesty in the first 100 days. I think it will be detrimental to this country if she actually becomes president.
So what do you make of the response to you and families like yours who've basically been dismissed by the left as irrelevant? Your stories don't seem to matter. Why do you think that is?
It doesn't fit the narrative. I am very disappointed. We've reached out to both sides of the aisle, and only Mr. Trump is the one who responded to our call out around illegal immigrants and the impact they're having on our families.
Well, Julie, I'm so sorry for the loss of your son. He was a beautiful child, 25 years old, too young to lose his life.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Ainsley?
All right, thank you, Tucker. Well, overnight, 3 establishment candidates winning the primaries in their closely watched state races. Senators John McCain and Marco Rubio and Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz now gearing up for a very fierce re-election. What could the results mean for the general election? Let's ask our political panel, GOP strategist Kathy Lynn Taylor, Ipsos Public Affairs President Cliff Young, and Democratic strategist Michael Tobin. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So what do y'all think? Do you think you can look at what's happening in the primaries and what's happening in these states, and then does that give you a good indication of what we can expect in the general?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Polling data right now is kind of like Play-Doh. Everybody's molding it to fit the narrative they want to tell. And it's been really hard to really decipher the polls and match them up with what's happened throughout this entire election campaign. But what is interesting about last night is it was the night of the incumbent. Everybody's been telling this story, or at least the mainstream media has, that, you know, Trump is hurting down ballot candidates and they're not going to be able to win. But Republicans had a good night and incumbents had a good night. And the Trump-like candidates didn't necessarily prevail, but strong incumbents did. So it's very, very interesting. If you want to draw a story from that, the story that Americans may be telling us is that they want change, they may want a disruptor, but they also may want to surround him by some strong, solid candidates.
Do they really want change, though?
So I don't know.
Do they want change?
We're going to see.
Look at the people who won. John McCain, Marco Rubio, Patrick Murphy, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. These are names that we've heard for years.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what's being said here. Incumbency is king. In 90% of the cases, the incumbent wins. I was not surprised at all by the results. The only thing that's really new is that now we know who's going to be in the general election, right? What we really need to look at and when assessing the House, the down-ballot races, the House and the Senate, is really the relative performance of the presidential candidates, because that's much more telling about what will happen in November than what happened yesterday.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Michael?
I think the House race with Debbie Wasserman Schultz we could put to the side as an outlier, because she's been in office long enough to have gerrymandered her district so that she has certain blocks and certain houses and certain neighborhoods and not others. So putting that to the side, she certainly is, despite the controversy involving the DNC putting its thumb on the scale for Hillary during the primaries. But Florida was especially interesting because there they're saying in a presidential matchup, talking about national issues in a national campaign, we pick Trump, Republican primary voters. But when it comes to representing our state's interests, we want our guy who we voted for previously. And maybe, contrary to my colleagues, there's some buyer's remorse with Republican voters for Trump, and they're saying maybe we need to hedge and put in the guy we didn't choose in the primary and make sure he's in the Senate, like you said, surrounding him with some old hands who we've already picked.
You don't agree with that?
Well, I just don't think we know yet. I mean, every day we're seeing Trump tighten in the polls a little bit more, so it's hard to say there's buyer's remorse at this point. I do think people are trying to hedge their bets a little bit. We may want some disruption, but we also want to make sure our interests are represented. It's going to be very interesting to see, and certainly as we look forward to states like Missouri, who has this bellwether effect, has been known for always choosing the presidential candidate. Right now, they have a gubernatorial candidate who is a real disruptor outlier like Trump that they picked on the Republican side over 3 or 4 other candidates. So it's very interesting as we start to look ahead to the other states what's going to happen.
All right, great. Thank you so much, guys,
Thank
for
you.
being with us. Kathy and Cliff and Michael, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Donald Trump says he's a champion of the middle class and will get people back to work. That's the whole point of his campaign, he says. But will his outsider appeal actually get working class voters to the polls? Here to tell us is a man with some perspective on this. He's former strategy director to British Prime Minister David Cameron, and he is the CEO of CrowdPack. He is Steve Hilton, and he joins us now. Steve, it's great to see you this morning.
Good to be with you, Tucker.
So a lot of people in the Trump campaign and outside of it have drawn a connection between what happened in the Brexit vote in June in the UK and what's happening in the US now, this kind of revolt of ordinary people against what they perceive to be the ruling class. Do you think there is something like that going on globally?
Yeah, I think there's a real connection. I don't think you can read too much into it, but I think there's a basic fact of life, which is that for the last few decades, actually, it feels to many people, to working people, that whoever they vote for, whether it's in the UK a Labour government or a Conservative government here in America, if it's Republicans or Democrats in charge, nothing really seems to change in their lives. And what they see is technology and globalization reducing the economic security that they've been used to. And so they're basically saying, we've had enough of it. We really want a change. And that's why I think the underlying message of Brexit really resonated in the UK.
Yes.
And I think it's the same story here with Trump. Of course, they're different countries and there are nuances, but the underlying resentment about the fact that lives don't seem to be getting better right across the economy, I think is a really significant factor.
But not right across the economy. I mean, at least here, in the last 2 years under Obama, 90% of the income gains have gone to the top 1%. So it's not like nobody's benefiting. Some people are benefiting.
Right. Yeah, but very few. And I think that has been the consequence of changes in the economy that go back decades now.
Yes.
The way that economic power has been centralized in the hands of fewer and fewer big companies and giant global corporations, and the way that tax rules and regulations have allowed those who are the insiders to really make the most of it for themselves, while startups and entrepreneurs and small businesses really struggle. So I think that's also adding to the sense of resentment.
Do you find it striking that a billionaire is holding himself out as the champion of the middle class?
It's interesting, actually, when you look at Trump, of course he's got some of the characteristics of the very people that a lot of people really hate. But actually, if you think about the business world that he's been in, construction, what that has done, I think, is brought him into contact, direct day-to-day contact with working people in a way that most people with his wealth don't normally get the chance to encounter. So I think it has given him a kind of affinity for the lives of real working people that's coming out in the way he's communicating in this campaign and the way he seems to be able to relate to people.
So if you're advising Trump and you were trying to help him make inroads with middle-class voters, what would the message be? What would you recommend?
I would say just focus on that economic message.
Yes.
And actually do more of it, because the fundamental components of his economic plan do represent the kind of change people want to see. And I think that if he makes that clear, if you elect me, we're going to have a change of direction. Working with a Republican Congress, I think that's another really important factor in all this, because remember that when it comes to economic policy, Congress is really important.
Of course.
And so what you might see if you've got a Republican in the White House and Republicans controlling Congress is an end to the gridlock and real pro-growth, pro-enterprise policies. And I think if he sticks to that message, then I think he'll do very well.
No more noise. Steve Hilton, great to see you this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
On the debate stage.
Well, psychiatrist and Fox News Medical A-Team's Dr. Keith Abloh is here to assess this strategy. Doctor, it's great to see you this morning. This doesn't sound like a crazy strategy to me, and it's something I think that every presidential candidate does during the debates. You're trying to figure out how to, pick at the other guy's weaknesses. Will this work with Trump?
Well, sure, it's something that every candidate probably does, probably should do. Psychology is a very powerful tool to unearth what does get under people's skin, if you will. But listen, with Donald Trump, kind of what you see is what you get. I have to say, when the small hands issue was raised during the debate, this supposedly got the Clinton campaign very excited. They thought, man, he's off his game. He wasn't off his game at all. Freud would have been standing up like applauding, standing ovation. To be able to address such an intensely personal issue and say, listen, there's no problem in that department. To me, that showed an incredible degree of psychological strength. With Donald Trump, he may err. He may make errors in saying what he thinks, telling us the truth, saying things that are gritty, perhaps attacking with some unkind words, which he could scale back. But you know what? His demons are on his sleeve. There's not a lot of psychoanalysis that hasn't been presented already.
Dr. Abloh, I was reading this morning that one of the psychologists that they're consulting, that Hillary Clinton's camp's consulting, is one of the guys that helped Donald Trump write Art of the Deal, someone who really knows him well.
Well, and so good for them, if you will. But listen, I think Americans know Donald Trump pretty well. He's brash. He will tell you what he thinks. He will go to war over an issue he believes in, and he will posture in the deal-making. Yes, listen, he'll say the Mexicans, they're going to pay for every cent of that wall. Well, he knows the Mexicans are listening, and frankly, if they pay 68%, it might be a very good deal in his mind, but he's not going to show his cards.
Right. I guess the risk with Donald Trump is he's never been in a one-on-one debate. He's been on 1 on 16, 1 on 8, 1 on 3, but he's never been in a one-on-one. That could be a little bit different. There's no time to rest. I think that he could fatigue.
Yeah, good luck. Here's the thing. This guy talks about his childhood. He has 4 adoring children. He's been married more than once. He says that his life's been somewhat messy. Hillary Clinton, we know literally almost nothing about the pain she may have experienced in childhood or what her real life story has been. We know only one thing. She's addicted to power. This is Imelda Marcos on steroids. So the bottom line is, use that as your bellwether. Anything that gives Hillary Clinton more power, she does. Stays in a marriage with multiple affairs, doesn't matter to her. She's closer to power.
Study Imelda. Thanks, Dr.
Imelda.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abloh.
And her shoes aren't even nearly as good.
And not as many.
All right, how would you feel?
I don't know about that.
They're all lefties.
Thanks, Dr. Abloh. I guess they'll both have to figure out each other's weaknesses and go after one another. We'll be watching for sure.
Day lead up to the big weekend. Meanwhile, big news last night.
Yeah, in just a few hours, Donald Trump is going to head down to Mexico, and he did make that announcement last night.
It was a counterintuitive move. He's meeting with the president of Mexico just hours before Trump gives his big immigration speech tonight.
What's going to be behind closed doors and what's not? Joining us right now from Phoenix, Fox News senior national correspondent John Roberts. John.
Hey, Brian, Tucker, Ainsley, good morning to you. We don't know what's going to be behind closed doors and what is not at this point. But here's another thing. Donald Trump at this moment not planning to take any U.S. media with him. So at this time, we're going to have to rely on the Mexicans for any coverage that we get. He should be leaving his house in Beverly Hills in the next few minutes because he wants to get there by about 12 o'clock Eastern time. And it's a little more than a 3-hour flight. Counterintuitive, you said it, this invitation went out on Friday to both Donald Trump and to Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump was the first one to accept it. Hillary Clinton saying, we don't need to meet with Peña Nieto because we talk with the Mexicans all the time. Hillary Clinton's campaign now saying, well, we look forward to meeting with him. Wouldn't you just love to be a fly on the wall, too, during that meeting? Because here is a Mexican president who has likened Donald Trump to Mussolini and Hitler. Here is a candidate who has been very critical of Mexico for taking advantage of the United States, says he wants to renegotiate the NAFTA deal, accuses Mexico of sending criminals and others across the border, and insists that he's going to build a huge wall between the United States and Mexico, and that Mexico is going to pay for it. All of this, of course, a curtain raiser for Donald Trump's big immigration speech today in Phoenix at the convention center behind me. Got a little bit of a curtain raiser on that in terms of what he'll say from Kellyanne Conway on the O'Reilly Factor last night. Listen.
No amnesty, no legalization, no sanctuary cities. When dealing with the 11 million or so, he wants to abide the law, enforce the law, which is a novel concept in Washington. People who have committed a crime are gone. And then he wants to see what we're left with. He will address that tomorrow, and I think you will see one of the toughest speeches on illegal immigration in modern political history.
And some new polls out this morning. ABC News, Washington Post. A little bit of mix of good news and bad news for Donald Trump, but bad news almost all around for Hillary Clinton. Take a look at this. Unfavorable ratings. Her unfavorable rating now at 59%, pretty much even with Donald Trump. That is an increase of 6 points from early August, an indication that all of these scandals that have been dogging her about emails, the Clinton Foundation, have been taking hold. Among women, she has gone up 9 points in her unfavorable ratings, while Donald Trump has actually gone down from 70 points to 65% among women. So that's an improvement for him, though there's been a commensurate increase in his unfavorable ratings among men. He's now at 60%. And take a look at this. African-American voters, Donald Trump's unfavorable ratings now stand at 84%. You're saying, wow, that's bad, right? It's down 7 points from 91% in early August. So in some of these numbers, he's actually moving in the right direction, while Hillary Clinton is moving in the wrong direction. Ainsley, Brian,
I wonder why that is. You know, his campaign team changed, John, recently. Kellyanne Conway, you just showed us a clip of her. We're going to have her on the show at 8:30 coming up to ask her about some of these issues and talk to her about the immigration speech tonight at 6 o'clock.
And his trip to Mexico. So here's the thing. Trump's going to Mexico. The government of Mexico is basically hostile to the United States, very hostile to the United States. Do you think there's any chance that Hillary Clinton will go to Mexico and plead America's case, stand up for the United States? There's literally no chance. There is a chance Donald Trump will plead America's case.
Hillary Clinton wouldn't even go to Baton Rouge when her own people.
But to stand up for our interests.
She's not going to do it. She was invited. She didn't go. Donald Trump went.
She actually said the last time she was in Mexico that I can remember, when speaking publicly, she blamed us for us wanting drugs, not because the drugs were coming across the border.
Oh, really?
I do think this is going to be important because it's unscripted. In ages which everything's scripted, everything's on the prompter, we have somebody going over to Mexico with a president that said things compared to Mussolini and Hitler. We do not know what's closed doors, what they're going to say together, and we know that Donald Trump said you're going to build a wall and you're going to pay for it. How is that going to go?
Well, it can only be productive, right? I mean, you have two leaders of countries. They need to work together to build this wall, to decide who's going to pay for it. And I think it's a great move on Donald Trump's part. I think you go face to face with your enemies. If someone said something about you or your family, it's better just to address it head on, clear the air, fix the problem, and move on.
And to stand up for our interests. Look, illegal immigration is a pressure relief valve for Mexico. It's a corrupt government. Its economy does not serve its own citizens. If it weren't for immigration to the United States and remittances sent back to Mexico, that country would collapse. And so for their president to refer to either one of our presidential candidates as Hitler is too much.
Right.
It's outrageous, actually.
He did it in Canada. And by the way, it's not just Mexicans. It's other Central and South American nations.
That's right.
Those people, they come right through Mexico and don't stay in Mexico. Let's talk about Hillary Clinton. We know 14,900 emails were released that the FBI had a chance to look at because they retrieved themselves, that the Clinton camp did not hand over, that the State Department did not screen. So we know that. Now we find out that at least 30 of those emails contain information about Benghazi.
So you're saying she didn't release 15,000 emails, even though she said she turned over all of her emails.
Did she really say that?
I don't know.
1:15.
Well, there's big election news from overnight. 4 political powerhouses gearing up for the fierce general elections after winning their primaries overnight.
All of the winners soundly beating their outside opponents. So what does this mean for the... Oh, I can't even talk. I almost bit my tongue. What does it mean for the general election?
This is like the wrong job to not be able to talk. Fox News national correspondent Ed Henry can always talk. At least that's what it said on his resume.
I've been doing it for 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think
Bite your tongue, Ainsley. You know, we keep hearing voters are angry and want to throw the bums out, and yet the establishment keeps on rolling. In Florida, Marco Rubio won by over 50 points in his primary battle. A lot closer for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. The congresswoman only won by 13 points after that DNC scandal and a tough challenge from a Bernie Sanders supporter. In Arizona, Sheriff Joe Arpaio won by double digits. John McCain survives the toughest primary battle on the Republican side of his career by about a dozen points. McCain made clear last night he's planning to win the general, be back in the Senate in January. Said he'll be a thorn in the side of either President Clinton or President Trump. McCain vowing to keep up the Straight Talk Express at the age of
of 80, while Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who I mentioned survived his primary, he's 84 years old and said age is just simply not a factor.
I want to say I'm too old. I'm not too old. Okay, I work 14 hours a day. All right? You know it. You guys have been following me around for years and years. So I am going, age means nothing.
So, Tucker and Ainsley, this is obviously a central question for Republican Donald Trump. How does he thread that needle of tapping into voter anger, but still beating somebody, Hillary Clinton, who has a lead right now, even though she's the ultimate government insider in a year of the outsider? And I mentioned Tucker and Ainsley because this whole idea that old guys can win and age is not a factor, this is good news for Brian Kilmeade.
That is not right, and that was not in the prompter. That is Ed Henry.
No, it is in the prompter. I wrote it.
No, that's in the prompter. I can see it. I'm 47 and I feel worn out. How do you do it at 84?
Old guys doing great.
No, not you. I meant Joe Arpaio. People get very touchy when they get older. Come on back, Brian.
I always ask him, what does your generation think about certain things?
Right. Hey, I am not
Thank
old.
you, Ed.
Hey, thank you very much,
You're
Ed.
only as old as you feel, so you're right. You're very young.
That hurts my feelings. Well, if you want to find out what's going on with Donald Trump, it's one-stop shopping. Kellyanne Conway is here, the campaign manager that's revamped everything over the last 3 weeks, including a stunning news last night, rumored then confirmed. What went into the decision, Kellyanne, as we welcome you to the couch, to have Donald Trump go to Mexico before his immigration speech? What's the backstory?
Well, this is Mr. Trump's decision, as are all the decisions in the campaign and the messaging. He really appreciated being invited by the president of Mexico to go down, these two would-be leaders, talking about I think the shared concerns between our two nations. Obviously, illegal immigration, Brian, but also trade, also drugs flowing over the border. And it's very important to show that you're willing to work with a neighboring country before you're president. And I would just contrast this again to Hillary Clinton's schedule. Yesterday, she raised gazillions more dollars in the Hamptons. Last week, she was in Hollywood doing the same. We are just in one span, just today, visiting the president of Mexico, having that conversation, and then jetting over to Arizona to give a seminal immigration speech.
So the governor of Mexico actively encourages its citizens to illegally emigrate into the United States. Is Trump going to bring that up? Is this going to be confrontational anyway? What's he going to say to the president?
I think it'd be informational, and these are two very strong personalities, as you know, Tucker, so I can't imagine they're not going to be themselves, but you can be yourself and still be cordial and still have a productive conversation. I think this is what leaders do. You know, in the last couple weeks, Governor Pence and Mr. Trump went right down to Louisiana when they saw people in need. Now he's being invited by the president of Mexico to go and start a conversation, not have a conversation through pundits in the media talking about who doesn't like whom and who said what about who 3 years ago, but to actually discuss the issues that affect both of us on both sides of the border.
Kellyanne, the polls are narrowing. We're seeing like Hillary has maybe a 4-point lead in some of the polls this morning. Is that because he brought you on board? Is it because his message has changed with immigration? Is it because he's staying more on point? What do you think? What do you give credit to?
I think it's that people are seeing more of Mr. Trump out in the stump, and they're listening to him give actual policy speeches, Ainsley. So you have the scarcity strategy of the Clinton campaign, which is less is supposed to be more. We don't see her. We only see her. She doesn't talk to the press. She totally disrespects you in your profession. We're out there giving speeches on law enforcement, on defeating radical Islam, on middle-class tax relief. Today, meeting with the president of Mexico, and then giving a speech on immigration. So I think people are seeing the contrast. In the Fox News polling and everybody's polling, voters don't say, hey, I'd really like a presidential candidate to ignore the press, ignore Louisiana, ignore an invitation, and raise money. They're saying, talk to me about health care, talk to me about the economy, talk to me about ISIS.
And there is a Fox poll coming out today. I'm very curious to see how it goes, because most people are focusing, like you, the experts, on the battleground states and less about the national polls. Quickly on the format, Kellyanne. They're going to meet behind closed doors. Will they come out with a joint statement afterwards? Will we see anything about them interacting together? Is this going to look at all like the president does after he meets with a world leader?
It really will look like that in terms of what we've planned and what we expect, Brian. And that's up to them if they make a joint statement, but you could probably
Will they take questions from the press?
They are. There's going to be press availability, Mexican press, American press. So we're very excited about that opportunity as well, and look at that in direct contrast to Hillary. And thanks for mentioning the tightening polls. If you look at these swing states, it's really amazing what's happened just in the last 2 weeks, because 3 weeks ago, everybody's hair was on fire. Look at the polls. The race is over. He can't recover. And actually, Hillary Clinton's number has basically stayed the same, static. And it's Trump that's incrementally catching up to her again. I like the fact that we were a little behind there for a while. while because I think it lit a fire into the campaign, had us treat ourselves like the underdog. I mean, there's nothing that'll sharpen the mind and stiffen the spine, much like you're losing to Hillary Clinton.
So I'm amazed by the numbers among black voters, which have improved. I mean, not dramatically, but noticeably in a real way. The very same week that Hillary Clinton basically tries to tie Donald Trump to the KKK. What is going on there? That's not expected. How did he do that?
You know, that's Americans, Tucker, saying, I just don't buy that. That doesn't make sense to me. I think you've overreached. And that conversation didn't create a single job, didn't give health insurance to a single uninsured person, didn't deter one more radical terrorist from doing their dirty work. And I think they also look at Trump taking his case directly to the voters. And you have to give the guy credit. You know, we'll be in Detroit, we'll be in some other cities coming up where he's taking the case directly to the communities of color. But, you know, if you give voice and visibility, if you look at leadership, it's really showing up and giving people the voice and listening to their concerns. And he's even done that in roundtables. We have just at Trump Tower, we've been talking, in other places, we've been talking to Hispanic leaders, we've been talking to African-American leaders. It's just fascinating to watch how much he loves listening to them. And it's not all a list of grievances. This is what's wrong in our community. They're also talking about their accomplishments. They're talking about what motivates people in a positive fashion. We're going to be the optimistic, forward-looking, inspirational campaign that actually talks about substance.
Kellyanne, I want to talk to you about the debate prep because we have about 3 more weeks. And how prepared is he? What's he doing to prepare? And also, we're getting word this morning that Hillary Clinton has hired a psychologist and talked to some psychologists. In fact, one that helped him write his book, so that she can go head to head with him and maybe get under his skin.
Hillary hired a psychologist. I won't touch that. But if it's to help get under Donald Trump's skin, Ainsley, why can't she just, what is she so afraid of? Why can't she just show up and say, I'm going to defend Obamacare that's been a disaster. I'm going to explain what the heck I meant by last month in my convention speech referring to savage terrorists as, quote, our determined enemies. She can explain why she's not for school choice and charters. She doesn't respect homeschoolers. I mean, why not just show up and have a debate on the issues? Why all this, this cage match stuff, this psychological warfare? It tells you that she knows the issue set doesn't really favor her. And it tells you that the only way that she can actually win is by trying to make Donald Trump seem so unpalatable.
Well, David Park called Donald Trump a psychopath.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. After Tim Kaine last week, I mean, a governor, a senator, a mayor, former head of the DNC, now running for VP, just really doing the dirty work, I think, of the Clinton lexicon and also referring, I don't like to repeat the criticisms, but also I think shadowing Hillary Clinton's slurs about Donald Trump and some people who we've disavowed completely. But look, that doesn't help anybody. The voters expect and demand a conversation. So if they want, look, I think what happens, Ainsley, in these debates is the one thing the American people can see right away is if you're yourself. Is this the authentic person? Are you trying to be somebody or not? I mean, I would assume that even in not accepting the invitation to see the president of Mexico, Hillary Clinton is still asking her pollsters and focus groupers. Mr. Trump didn't ask me to go survey people to see what they thought. Leaders make decisions, and they show up.
Kellyanne Conway.
Thank you.
Campaign manager.
Thanks for showing up.
Great to see you this morning. Thanks for doing that. New controversy swirling around the Clinton campaign this morning around Hillary Clinton's support for Huma Abedin's mother. It's under fire because she has apparently some radical ties, and they have been exposed mostly by the man we're talking to now. His name is Paul Sperry. He's a New York Post columnist, and he's been working on this for quite some time. He's the author of a book called Infiltration, How Muslim Spies and Subversives Have Penetrated Washington. Paul Sperry, thanks for joining us this morning. So summarize, if you would, why voters ought to be concerned about Huma Abedin's mother and what her ties are to Hillary Clinton.
Okay, so the latest is, about the Radical Journal that Huma worked for, her mother's Radical Journal, for almost 13 years. Well, now it turns out there's a book that she published through the same institute that Huma worked for all those years that actually puts out this religious justification for really medieval treatment of women, for women, and including stoning adulterous wives, marital rape, killing women who have left the faith, and even female genital mutilation of young girls. So some really vile stuff. And then I found a video of the mother actually sympathizing with men who beat their wives. I mean, she was on tape, but there's footage of her excusing domestic battery and saying that men are the real victims in the household.
So I'm a little confused here, because the one thing we know about Hillary Clinton is that she is a sincere feminist. She cares and talks an awful lot about the rights of women and girls. And here she is, in effect, making excuses for a system that treats women as property and is cavorting with people who justify that system. What is this about?
Yeah, it's really getting harder and harder for Hillary to reconcile this, but far from distancing herself from the radical mother, who basically could be the woman, could be a spokeswoman for the Taliban in Afghanistan with some of this radical stuff she's preaching. But far from distancing herself from the Huma's radical mother, she's actually, it turns out, Hillary's had an active relationship with this mother, visiting her over in Saudi Arabia, and even inviting her back into the States in Washington at the State Department for functions, including forums on women's issues as a leading thinker.
If a Republican got up and said, I don't think women should be allowed to vote or drive, they have to cover themselves, they're not fully humans or citizens, Hillary would denounce a person. But if it's a Muslim who says that, it's just another form of worship?
Yeah, and I mean, I've given the Clinton campaign a chance for her to renounce this relationship, and they have declined comment, although they did confirm that Huma Abedin did work for that radical journal for almost 13 years. But there's also a national security implication here that's very serious, and it turns out that she was actually over there promising in Saudi Arabia, the mother, that she would reverse the post 9/11 restrictions on Saudi student visas, and she delivered on that promise big time. The number of Saudi visas have skyrocketed since she made that promise to the mother over there in Saudi Arabia.
It's really unbelievable. Paul Sperry, thanks a lot for your work and for bringing this to our attention. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Tiger.